He didn't like how I answered, so he decided I was the problem. They say tone matters, but in my house, tone was a trap. Too soft and I was manipulative, too firm and I was cold. So I learned to say everything like it didn't cost me anything. And he still called it war. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's all be internet friends. That's not what I meant. He'd asked a question, something small, stupid even. Why didn't you get the bigger pack? His voice was flat but already defensive. I answered honestly, without flinching. Because the price per item wasn't actually better. It just looked that way. He blinked, sat back. So you think I can't do math? I stared at him. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, he said, crossing his arms. You said it like I made a dumb decision. I was just explaining my reasoning. He laughed once. Your reasoning, right? I picked up the receipt from the counter and pointed at the line item. Look, it's literally cheaper by the ounce in the smaller pack. It's not about you, it's just math. So now you're teaching me how to read. No, I'm explaining what I did and why. He stood up. You always do this. Talk like you're giving a presentation. I was calm. Exactly. I looked at him. You want me to yell? He didn't answer that. He just grabbed the keys from the counter. Forget it. The door clicked behind him before I could say anything else. Not that it mattered. I'd already said the wrong thing, not in content, but in delivery. It wasn't what I said. It was how calmly I said it. And in this house, logic without apology sounded like disrespect. Why are you always so clinical? It came out mid-argument. One of those circular ones that started with a missing chore and ended with me defending my entire personality. You always talk like a robot when we argue, he said, pacing near the sink. You just list things like I'm on trial. I stayed where I was. I try to be clear. Clear, he scoffed. You mean cold, detached. Like you're above the whole thing. I'm not above anything, I said. I just have to calculate everything I say. He froze. What's that supposed to mean? I met his eyes. It means if I cry, I'm too sensitive. If I raise my voice, I'm attacking you. If I stay calm, I'm clinical. So I pick the one that gives you the least ammunition. His jaw clenched. That's dramatic. No, it's strategic. He walked past me muttering, you make everything so heavy. I followed. You asked me why I sound like a machine. It's because I've learned to edit in real time. Because the wrong tone makes you hear something I didn't say. You're twisting this, he snapped. You're always twisting everything. I answered your question, I said quietly. You just didn't like the answer. He didn't respond. Just stormed off to the bedroom like walking away proved a point. I sat on the edge of the couch, not crying, not yelling, just measuring the weight of my voice, and realizing I'd spent years making it small enough to survive him. You're not apologizing right. It was after dinner, something about the dishes. A tone, a look. I'd said, I'm sorry that upset you. And he stopped wiping the counter like I'd cursed him. That's it, he asked. I looked up. What else do you want me to say? It doesn't sound like you mean it. I blinked. I do. I said I'm sorry. He laughed sharp. Yeah, like you're checking a box. I sat down slowly. Do you want me to say sorry or do you want me to bleed? He turned toward me, eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means nothing I say is ever enough unless I break while saying it. That's not true. Really? I asked. Because when I cry, you say I'm making it about me. When I stay calm, you say I'm heartless. When I speak plainly, you say I'm cruel. And when I finally apologize, you say it's not real. He didn't say anything. I added, what's the right combination, Eli? How do I say sorry without sounding too sorry or not sorry enough? He shook his head. You're twisting everything. No, I'm tired. That was the first time I'd said it out loud. Not angry, not loud, just tired. And in that moment, I realized it didn't matter what I said anymore, because he wasn't listening for the truth. He was listening for surrender. Jordan's not welcome here. He said it like a boundary, like a line in the sand I wasn't allowed to step over. It was after her last visit 2 nights ago. She'd brought wine, stayed too long, asked too many questions with her eyes. When she left, she hugged me tighter than usual, whispered into my hair, you're not the problem. He just hates not being the smartest one in the room. I didn't reply, just nodded like I wasn't already choking on every word I couldn't say. Now Eli stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She doesn't respect me, he said. She talks to you like I'm not even here. She talks to me like she knows me. She talks to you like I'm an idiot, he snapped. She talks to me like someone who's watched me get smaller. He ignored that. This is our space. I shouldn't have to deal with someone trying to sabotage what we're building. I folded the throw blanket on the couch. What are we building? He stared at me. Excuse me. You said sabotage. That means something's under construction. What exactly is being built here? He didn't answer. He just said it again, lower this time. She's not welcome here. I nodded once, not agreement, just acknowledgement, because I knew what this was now. He wasn't protecting our peace. He was eliminating my witnesses. Even the therapist got tired, not of him, of the sessions, of the way he hijacked them. Talked fast, filled silences, spun frustrations into logic so neatly that by the time I opened my mouth, it already felt like a rebuttal. Nadia would ask, Mara, how did that feel for you? And before I could speak, Eli would cut in. Well, I think what she's trying to say is. And Nadia let him, every time. So I started editing myself, shorter sentences, easier words. Neutral tone. I rehearsed on the drive over how to say something just right so I wouldn't be misunderstood, dismissed, twisted into a version of myself that didn't exist. One session, I said, it's exhausting trying to be understood. Eli leaned forward. She overthinks everything. I looked at Nadia. She just nodded, took a note, moved on. I nodded too. That was the week I stopped bringing my notebook. Stopped journaling before sessions. Stopped pretending we were building anything. I was showing up to be corrected, not heard. One night in the car afterward, Eli said, see, we're getting better. Nadia even said we've made progress. I stared out the window. She said we communicate well. He smiled, exactly. She meant you communicate well. He didn't respond, because somewhere inside he already knew. We weren't in therapy together. I was in therapy with him in the room. You're not mad, you're just mean. That's what he said when I asked him to lower his voice. He'd been ranting about the trash, the thermostat, the energy in the house, whatever that meant. I stood near the hallway, arms folded, keeping my voice measured. I said, please don't talk to me like that. He snapped his head toward me. See, that tone, that self-righteous pause you always do, you're not mad. You're just full of yourself now. I didn't answer right away because I could feel it. The shift. The moment where drawing a line became cruelty in his eyes, where anything that didn't accommodate him was labeled arrogance. You're different, he added. Colder. I'm clearer, I said. He stepped closer. You think you're better than me. I think I'm not responsible for how you handle being disagreed with. His face tightened. I waited for him to say it, the thing he always did when I held my ground. Instead, he turned around and muttered, You've been reading too many strong woman Instagram posts. I didn't move, didn't follow, didn't soften. Because the worst part wasn't that he said I was mean. It was that for the first time, he didn't call me loving. He didn't see the effort anymore, only the absence of submission. And that told me more about him than any apology ever could. Do you even want this? He asked me in the middle of folding laundry, like it was casual, like the weight of the question hadn't already been crushing both of us for weeks. I was pairing socks. He was holding a wrinkled shirt he never wore. You've been checked out, he said, like completely. I didn't look up. I've been here. Yeah, physically, but everything else, gone. I put the socks down. I've been showing up. Listening, trying. He threw the shirt onto the pile. Trying how? You don't even fight anymore. You just sit there with that face like you've already made up your mind. Because I have, I said quietly. That stopped him. I'm done crawling to prove I'm loyal, I added. Done bending every word so you won't twist it. Done apologizing for not performing the version of love you feel safest with. He didn't move. I stood up. You want softness, but only on your terms. You want fire when it flatters you. You want silence when it protects your ego. But the moment I mirror any of your coldness back at you, I become unrecognizable. His voice dropped. So this is it. This is me no longer convincing you I care. I walked to the bedroom, didn't slam the door. Because for the first time, I didn't need noise to feel firm in my choice. And for once, he couldn't weaponize my calm. Tessa watched me unravel. We were in the break room. I was standing by the sink, rinsing out a mug with more force than necessary. She leaned against the counter, sipping her soda through a straw, quiet but alert. You okay? She asked. I nodded without looking. just tired. She didn't reply, just waited. After a while, she said, "You used to light up about everything." I finally looked at her. "What?" She shrugged. "When you first started here, you were all sparkle and snacks and playlists for every mood. Now you flinch before you speak." I blinked. "I don't flinch." She tilted her head. "You pause right before you say anything, like you're running it through 5 filters in your head." I set the mug down. "It's complicated." She nodded. "So is grief, and that's what this looks like." I crossed my arms. "I'm not grieving, I'm just—" She raised her hand gently. "You don't owe me the story. I just wanted to say, whatever's making you smaller, you don't have to live there." I didn't reply. She grabbed her drink, gave me a soft smile, and walked out. I stood in that break room for another full minute, because it was the first time someone had noticed, not my silence, not my absence, but the way I had started apologizing with my body before I ever said a word. Claire finally understood. It was a Sunday call, the kind she made every few weeks, usually filled with updates I didn't ask for and gentle guilt I didn't push against. But this time, her voice softened midway through telling me about the neighbor's dog. She said, "You don't sound like yourself lately." I said, "Maybe this is myself." There was a pause. Then carefully she asked, "Is something wrong?" I almost said no, almost defaulted to the daughter's script, pleasant, polished, grateful. But instead I said, "Did I learn that from you?" She was quiet again. "What do you mean?" she asked. I sat down, over-apologizing, bending, managing other people's moods so they won't leave. She exhaled slow. "I did that with your father." I said nothing. She continued, "I used to think it was strength, keeping peace, reading the room, fixing things before they broke." I nodded even though she couldn't see it. "I taught you that, didn't I?" she whispered. "You didn't mean to." "I know," she said, "but I did." We didn't say much after that. But before we hung up, she said, "You don't have to prove you're worth staying for, not to anyone." It wasn't everything. It wasn't healing. But it was the first time my mother stopped mistaking my silence for obedience and started seeing it as survival. I stopped explaining, not in anger, not as punishment, just stopped. No more over-clarifying, no more softening edges or preempting misinterpretations, no more rehearsing replies in my head before speaking them out loud. The last time Eli asked why I was quiet, I looked at him and said, "I've said everything before, you just never wanted to hear it." He blinked like I'd slapped him. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't moved, but the stillness in my tone unsettled him more than any yelling ever had. "You can't just shut down," he said. "I'm not shut down," I replied. "I'm just done explaining why I deserve to be spoken to like a person." He rolled his eyes. "Here we go with the victim narrative again." I tilted my head. "That's what you hear when I say I want to be treated with respect." He didn't answer. He just turned away the way he always did when my calm threatened his control. But I didn't follow this time. Didn't chase. Didn't clarify. Because I'd realized something. In this relationship, my voice was never the problem. It was just too inconvenient to be heard, so I kept my peace. Literally. And in that silence, I found a version of myself that didn't need to argue to feel real. She didn't flinch. She didn't plead. She just existed, finally, fully. Cam pulled me aside. It was after a group dinner, one of those awkward, overly planned nights where everyone pretended nothing was wrong, even though Eli barely looked at me and I barely tried. The bill came, the conversation fizzled. People stood, hugged, filed out. Cam lingered. I was gathering my things when he touched my elbow gently and said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" We stepped outside. The air was cooler than I expected. He didn't stall. "I love him," he said, "you know that." I nodded, but I see it now. I didn't ask what he meant. He kept going. "You didn't change, Mara, you just stopped shrinking." I looked at him, he looked down. "You used to walk into a room and soften everything. Even him. You'd crack a joke, light intention, carry the whole dynamic like it was your job." I didn't reply. "But tonight," he said, "you didn't do any of that. You just existed. And you looked freer, even when you weren't smiling." I exhaled. He shoved his hands into his pockets. "I don't know if he's ever going to say it, but I needed you to hear it from someone." I nodded once. "Thank you." He nodded back, didn't hug me, didn't say he'd keep in touch. Just walked away like he knew he'd already said the one thing that mattered. And for once, I didn't explain it to anyone. I just let the truth stand. He called it a phase. Like the months of silence, the measured boundaries, the distance I'd carved between us with clarity instead of chaos, all of it was temporary in his mind. A mood, a tactic. We were sitting across from each other at the edge of the bed. He tossed his phone onto the sheets and said, "You'll come around, you always do." I didn't look up. "You're just in one of your moods," he added, more amused than concerned. "You've done this before, the icy thing. You're good at it." I finally met his eyes. "You mean I've broken first?" He scoffed. "That's not what I said." "But that's what you meant," I said. "You think silence means manipulation. That quiet means withholding. You think this is a tactic." He said nothing. I continued. "But I'm not cold. I'm not distant. I'm just done begging you to hear words you only respect when they come from your own mouth." He leaned back. "So this is permanent." I stood slowly. "It's honest." He watched me walk toward the door. "You're different," he muttered. "No," I said without turning around. "You're just not used to me holding my ground." And when I left the room, I didn't take the blame with me. Just my voice steady, even mine again. Malik didn't flinch. It was the third time we'd shared a lunch break on the park bench outside the office. Same spot, same quiet. He didn't talk much, just unwrapped his sandwich like the world wasn't on fire. I liked that. That day, I spoke more than usual, told him about the conversations that never landed, the tone I had to manage, the therapist who took better notes on Eli's voice than mine. He didn't interrupt. I told him about how I used to talk myself in circles just to land in an apology, how every answer I gave was picked apart until it bled. Still, he said nothing, just took a sip from his thermos and handed me a folded napkin when I stopped mid-sentence and blinked too hard. When I finally said, "Maybe I was the problem," he didn't rush to comfort me. He just asked why. Because I always made him mad. Malik looked over, calm, measured. "No, you just stopped making yourself smaller." I didn't respond. He leaned back against the bench. "What you described, that's not disagreement. That's control. That's rewording your reality until you can't trust your own mouth." The wind moved between us. "I didn't even tell you the worst of it," I said quietly. "You didn't need to," he replied. I listened, and for the first time in months, that was enough. Because Malik didn't need the whole story to believe me. He just needed the truth I'd already spoken. I packed light, 2 bags, no ceremony. No last-minute glances at photos or corners of the apartment we used to pretend was a home. He was gone when I left, out running errands, probably thinking things were fine or fixable. I folded the spare key into an envelope, wrote his name in the corner, slid it onto the kitchen counter beside the half-used bottle of the oat milk he liked but never bought himself. I didn't leave a goodbye note, just one line. "I didn't stop loving you. I just started loving myself more." I stood at the door for a second, hand on the knob, not hesitant, just breathing, because leaving isn't always escape. Sometimes it's return to yourself, to your voice, to the space you had to shrink to be held. The bags were light, but I was lighter. No yelling, no breakdown, no witness. Just the quiet relief of ending something without needing it to erupt to feel justified. I didn't text him, didn't look back, didn't wait for the narrative he'd try to shape, because I wasn't responsible for how he'd explain my absence, only for making peace with my choice. And peace, I learned, doesn't always sound like a door slamming. Sometimes it's just the soft click of a lock behind you and the steady echo of your own footsteps as you walk away. He didn't cry, just got defensive. The text came 2 hours after he got home. I saw his name flash across the screen, but I didn't open it right away. I knew what it would say before I read it. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. "So you're really just giving up. After everything I did for you." No mention of the note. No questions about where I was. No acknowledgement of the silence, just a pivot, clean and rehearsed, straight to guilt. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, another one came. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. If you wanted space, you could have just said so." I held the phone loosely in my hand. Not angry, not sad, just numb, the kind that comes after clarity, when the grief has already passed and you've stopped needing recognition to feel valid. He still didn't get it, still thought love was a contract I'd broken, that I owed him a negotiation. That leaving required his approval, but love isn't a lease, and I wasn't breaking a promise. I was ending a performance. He wanted me to feel guilty for needing softness, for asking to be heard without being dissected. And now that I'd left, he wanted the silence to feel like abandonment. But it didn't. It felt like air. Jordan helped me unpack. She pulled into the driveway 30 minutes after I texted her I'm out. No questions, no hesitation. Just a trunk full of grocery bags, folding hangers, and a bottle of wine she didn't wait to chill. We didn't talk much at first, just moved. She hung my dresses like they were worth something, arranged my books by color. Put the mugs I liked on the lowest shelf because you shouldn't have to reach for comfort. At one point, she paused with a box of shoes in her hands, looked at me across the half-finished living room and said, "You know he's going to spin it, right?" I nodded. "And you're not going to defend yourself." "No," I said, "I'm done explaining." She smiled, not sad, not smug, just proud. Good. When we finished, she sat on the edge of the couch, wiped her hands on her jeans, and said, "Now watch how light you start to feel." I laughed short and sharp. "You make it sound like magic." She raised an eyebrow. "Peace is magic when you've been living in a war zone." We opened the wine. Didn't toast to freedom or healing or new beginnings. Just sat in the middle of my new space, boxes half open, pillows still in plastic, and breath like the air didn't need to be earned. That night, I slept without tension in my jaw. And in the morning, I didn't flinch when the sun came in. He tried to rewrite the story. It started small, a few mutual friends texting me with questions they didn't have the courage to ask outright. Just checking in. "He's been quiet lately. He said you pulled away." Then came the real ones. "He told us you stopped trying. He said therapy made things worse because you were never really open. He said you made him feel stupid for caring." I didn't respond. I didn't rush to correct the narrative. Didn't send long explanations or defend my tone. Didn't list the receipts I had, the screenshots, the journal entries, the way Nadia's voice always softened right before Eli took the floor in therapy. I didn't rewrite the truth, I just let it sit. And when the story got louder when someone messaged, "He said you were unfaithful, that you had someone else," I replied once. A screenshot, no caption. Just the message he'd sent the day I left. "So you're really giving up after everything I did for you?" They didn't reply, I didn't follow up. Because the people who needed proof were already halfway out the door. And the ones who knew better, they never asked. Eli tried to repaint the ending. But the thing about silence, real silence, is that it doesn't defend. It doesn't scramble, it just waits. And eventually, the noise dies down on its own. I didn't block him, I just stopped checking. The text slowed, then stopped. The missed calls dried up. The friends who had picked sides stopped reaching out too, not because they understood, but because the drama lost heat without my participation. I didn't make an announcement, didn't post a quote, didn't leave a trail of captions for him to decode. I just turned off notifications, moved his name to the bottom of my contacts, set the thread to archive. And with every day that passed, the impulse to check dulled, like muscle memory fading after an injury heals. I started reading again. The kind of books that made me feel slow and grounded. I played music without curating it to fit someone else's mood. I cooked only what I craved. I laughed at a meme without thinking if he'd find it dumb. Said no without apologizing. Said yes without guilt. There were moments, early ones, when I thought, should I respond? Just once. Clarify. But then I'd remember. Healing doesn't ask you to go back and explain yourself to the people who made you doubt your sanity for simply needing peace. So I didn't block him. I just stopped bending toward the door he kept half open. And that, more than anything, closed it for good. Malik saw me breathe. We were sitting on a bench outside the market, a bag of oranges between us. It was the kind of day where nothing urgent existed. No phones buzzing. No words needed. He peeled one slowly, handed me half without asking. I took it, smiled, not politely, not performatively, just naturally. After a while, he said, "You laugh with your whole face now." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Back then it was just your mouth, sometimes not even that, but now it hits your eyes." I blinked, caught off guard. He added, "It's weird, right? How we forget what peace looks like until someone else reminds us we found it." I didn't answer. because I remembered the version of me that used to shrink after every disagreement. The version who studied her own tone like a threat, who edited kindness into apology, love into labor, clarity into caution. And now I sat with a man who didn't want anything from me but honesty, who didn't try to fix, interpret, or minimize. He saw joy and called it by name. I laughed again. Full, loud, didn't check myself. He smiled. Told you. That night, I passed a mirror and caught my reflection mid-smile. And for the first time, I didn't double-check what it meant. I just let it stay. He said I changed. It was months later, a random run-in at the bookstore we used to visit on Sundays. I was holding a copy of something new. He wasn't holding anything at all. We locked eyes. He approached. He looked older or maybe just smaller. I braced. He smiled like memory. Said, "You look good." "Thanks." A pause then. "You seem different." I tilted my head, let the silence stretch. Then I said it, not cruel, not sharp, just true. "No, you're just not used to seeing me whole." His smile faltered. I didn't wait for a reply. Just nodded once and turned toward the register. I didn't feel power. I felt closure. Not because I'd won anything, but because I didn't need anything from him anymore. Not his guilt, not his regret, not his version of the story. I walked out into the light, book tucked under my arm, breath steady. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't carry the weight of being misunderstood. I just existed. Soft, unapologetic, intact. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.